Are we the baddies? The truth about Super Earth, the Helldivers, and humanity as a whole. Yo, what's up, guys? Today I'm basically going to do a smear campaign on the almighty Federation of Super Earth in Helldivers. Yep, that's right, which is pretty much going to brand me as a dissident forever and probably get me executed. Hooray! I guess I better buy myself a ticket to Cyberstam with the way I'm talking. Seriously though, I'm going to highlight some of Super Earth's extremely authoritarian actions from the lore from Helldivers 1 and Helldivers 2 that I feel most people are probably quite unfamiliar with. This is all in an effort to help paint a picture about how dark and dystopian the reality is for humanity in the Helldivers universe and what it's like to live under the iron grip of the Federation of Super Earth and its managed democracy. Super Earth is the final product of many internal wars between humanity. The first big war being the Great War, which ended in a nuclear conflict that destroyed most of the northern hemisphere, turning it into an uninhabitable wasteland, and took place somewhere between 2015 and 2044. This Great War was likely fought by the United States and China, although neither country was destroyed. Out of the ashes of this nuclear war, the Federation of Super Earth was created and utilized a new form of authoritarian government-styled systems known as managed democracy. After Super Earth's founding, humanity became space-worthy in 2044. As a result, humanity ventured deep into space and made first contact with the aliens we know in the games, such as Terminds and the Illuminate, while the cyborgs were created from humanity itself, which we'll get into. First contact quickly turned sour as different ideologies collided with Super Earth's ideals. And seeing an opportunity to exploit these alien races, Super Earth went to war with each of these factions for their own nefarious purposes, thus leading to the start of the First Galactic War. After a successful victory on all three fronts, Super Earth entered an era known as the Great Democratization, where Super Earth enjoyed 100 years of peace, freedom, and democracy that led to a great expansion of Super Earth's grasp of the galaxy as a whole, leading them to acquire several dozens of different planets in the Milky Way galaxy. In Helldivers 2, we play shortly after the Great Democratization, that's a hard word to say, and experience the start of the Second Galactic War, and the one we're currently fighting now in-game. So now that we know a little bit about the timeline and how humanity went from what we know now to the Federation of Super Earth, let's talk about the Super Earth government and how exactly it functions. Super Earth operates under the guise of managed democracy, which is said to be an improved upon concept of the old democracy, which is the one we currently enjoy in parts of the world now, mainly Western countries. Looking at you, China. So what is managed democracy exactly? Well, managed democracy is actually a real thing, and is when a formally democratic government ends up functioning as a de facto authoritarian government. In this managed democracy, the government controls elections, such that the people can exercise democratic rights without truly changing public policy. Anyways, what this really means is that managed democracy are authoritarian regimes legitimized by its elections, but ultimately, these elections don't change their policies, motives, or goals. It's merely to convince the masses that they have a voice and to fool them into thinking their voices matter. And we can basically see this in how Super Earth conducts its elections. Voting in a Super Earth election utilizes computer-aided voting software, otherwise known as AI. So when voting, citizens fill in a survey, and the computer will automatically prescribe their most compatible candidate and force them to vote for that individual. Whether or not their voting actually changes top-level government on Super Earth is unknown, but based on Super Earth's current and previous actions, it is likely safe to assume that it does not. We can even hear a voice line in Helldivers 2 by the technician on our Super Destroyer who mentions the voting system, and she talks about how silly it is for people who want more control in their voting systems. with her mentioning that people who would want this think that they're going to become a political expert overnight, and it's better off that the AI just does it for them.
I heard that some dissidents wanted us to select our own candidates instead of using the algorithm. Great idea. Everyone will just become a political expert overnight.
So not only is Super Earth's voting system completely rigged and not really a vote at all, as it's selecting the candidates for the voters, their propaganda runs so deep that the people actually justify it, opposed to having true freedom of choice when it comes to their elected officials. You know, like a real democracy. I guess that's why they call it managed. And if you guys think that's bad, well, I have news for you. It gets a lot worse. Super Earth focuses on reinforcing total faith and trust in the Super Earth regime by utilizing continuous and incessant propaganda techniques, social pressures, and groupthink strategies on its own people, all of which Super Earth employs upon its own citizens to help control the narrative. They do this by implementing strict and merciless rule systems for its people and creating a tiered system inside the regime of loyalists and dissidents. Once this is established, Super Earth does everything it can to ensure full loyalty from its super citizens, with things such as surveillance, assigning democracy officers to oversee communities, and even holidays and events to keep people unwaveringly faithful and to never ask prodding questions about the government or what they're doing. Super citizens are also actively encouraged to report on their fellow neighbors if they suspect any suspicious activity taking place, or expect them to have dissenting thoughts. When dissidents are identified within the community, they are swiftly punished, whether that mean they be imprisoned or executed. We can see plenty of examples of this propaganda between the two Helldivers games, with a bunch of things like the broadcasting screen in Helldivers 1 stating, and I quote, "Questions regarding the Federation or government of Super Earth shall be sent to the appropriate quadrant. It is illegal to express oneself openly about the Federation or government of Super Earth in a negative manner, and in serious cases may result in arrest or termination," unquote. Another example is one of the privates in Helldivers 1 has a dialogue line where that they mention that their neighbor pressed charges on their son for not honoring the Super Earth flag, implying crimes serious enough are justified enough to turn in close family members.
My neighbor apparently pressed charges on his son for not honoring the Super Earth flag.
We can also see that Super Earth will execute anyone it deems alien sympathizers, and this has actually happened in the lore to entire units of Helldivers and citizens alike. We can also see this with people who dare question the terrorist bombings of Super Earth done by the cyborgs, with those who want peace between the bots considered hippies by a Super Earth senator by the name of John W. Killjoy, with him threatening these hippies to have them jailed or even executed. We can also see this in the case that the first use of Hellpods were when a socialist government at a place called Northman's Creek tried to secede from the Federation of Super Earth after sympathizing with the bugs. This resulted in 50 Helldivers dropping into Parliament there and executing everyone. We can also see some of this in the weapons in Helldivers 1, with the MP98 SMG's item description saying, "With the highest rate of fire in the arsenal, this weapon is often used by the Defense Ministry on Super Earth for rapidly incapacitating groups of wrong thinkers." And just to add to this, in Helldivers 2, the technician on our destroyer mentions that the local loyalty officer would give them sweets for telling them what's going on with the adults around town. So basically using kids as spies to spy on the adults and see if anyone's having any wrong think within the community.
Back when I was a kid, the local loyalty officer would give us sweets for telling him what was going on with the adults around town. Things they were saying, where they were headed, that sort of stuff. Nice to look back and know you were helping keep everyone safe, even if you didn't know it.
And this is just a small list of examples of this brutal propaganda with loyalty and dissenters within Super Earth. So I think this paints a pretty good picture of the climate of Super Earth and how it holds its citizens down with an iron grip, and will not allow them to think freely about the situations they're in, with them mercilessly stomping out any forms of resistance to the narrative of managed democracy. Now that we know a bit about Super Earth's past and how it deals with citizens to keep them wonderfully propagandized, let's talk about Super Earth's enemies and how Super Earth utilizes its influence to start and sustain unjust wars against them. The Terminid or bugs are a race of sentient insectoid creatures that have evolved over millions of years, with their home planet being the desert world of Kepler Prime. Initially, the bugs were relatively passive creatures, showing intelligence and generally keeping to themselves. They, however, began to eventually expand to different planets, and it's unclear how exactly they managed to do this, but they were doing this well into Helldivers 1. It is theorized that in the First Galactic War, the bugs might have got from planet to planet by using unhatched infant eggs or rapidly evolving super resilient microbes to get around different planets via meteorites or other things like that, comets, to get to different planets. So essentially the concept of panspermia. So why did Super Earth declare war on the bugs? Well, eventually Super Earth discovered that upon killing the bugs, they would decompose into something known as element 710, which in this case is simply oil, which humanity used to power their FTL faster than light engines for their destroyers. This was enough to declare war on the bugs and launch a fully fledged campaign against their race. To help convince the masses back home to go to war against these bugs, Super Earth launched a propaganda campaign portraying the bugs as murderous, fascist insects that wanted to kill and destroy all of humanity, including your children. This, of course, worked. Eventually, the war against the bugs was successful, and once victory was achieved, Super Earth spun the narrative to portray the killing of bugs as unnecessary and impractical to help justify the plans they had next for them. These plans revolved around farming the bugs for their oil and using them as a kind of livestock for a near infinite supply of element E710 over multiple different planets. This, of course, due to the bugs' inherently dangerous nature, led to failed farming attempts, with the bugs routinely breaking out of their farming facilities and wreaking havoc on planets. That is, until Super Earth scientists began altering the genetic code of the bugs, creating modifications to render them and their behaviors into a more docile state, to easier farm for their oil. Unfortunately, these Super Earth experiments are directly related to why the Terminids in Helldivers 2 have interesting new abilities, such as invisibility and corrosive bile abilities. So, we can see an active attempt by Super Earth to paint the bugs as an evil, fascist, murderous race of aliens that want to kill you and your family. All to utilize their bodies for oil to keep Super Earth's faster-than-light drives operational, and use them as a farming species. This was all despite the fact that in reality, the bugs were always a relatively smart, passive race of creatures that didn't have any real ill will against humans before the First Galactic War. This ultimately leads to the events of Helldivers 2, where Terminids break free and continue their attack on humanity. Whether it was the Terminids breaking free after 100 years of captivity, or the Federation secretly freeing them so they could harbor goodwill through another war, is ultimately unknown. Okay, now we're going to talk a bit about the bots. The cyborgs of Cyberstan were originally normal humans and were part of the Federation of Super Earth for a long while, but over time came to hate how Super Earth operated and saw through their lies and propaganda, with dissenters becoming more and more apparent on their home planet of Cyberstan. This, while bad enough already, was also exacerbated by Super Earth's distaste for the people of Cyberstan's traditions of modifying their bodies with cybernetics. This, of course, was a problem, as for the people of Cyberstan, they saw these augmentations as very important to them, with them justifying their actions by saying that the augmentations gave them a higher meaning in life and were essential to how they operated on Cyberstan. Aside from their augmentations and their distaste for Super Earth's propaganda, the cyborgs remained an uneasy part of Super Earth's Federation and stayed mostly to themselves on Cyberstan. So, how did Super Earth declare war on the cyborgs? Eventually, the divide became so large between the people of Cyberstan and Super Earth that Super Earth's top officials plotted a terrorist attack against their own people by detonating a bomb that killed over 8,000 innocent civilians in one major city center on Super Earth, and then framed the attack on the cyborgs. This is obviously wrong, and in reality, the cyborgs had no part in the bombing. This false flag attack allowed Super Earth to utilize the public outcry as momentum to declare war on Cyberstan. Once war was declared on Cyberstan, the cyborgs formally decided to secede from Super Earth, with cyborg leaders stating, and I quote, "Super Earth's ideals are a lie, and the people are brainwashed," unquote. After they succeeded from Super Earth, they went on to form the Collective of Cyberstan and became the enemy faction known as the Cyborgs in Helldivers 1. Despite their efforts, the Cyborgs were defeated in the First Galactic War. After their defeat, Super Earth recolonized Cyberstan, and the Cyborgs were forced to accept managed democracy or lose their civil rights altogether, which alone is a rare opportunity for Super Earth to be even offering the Cyborgs an opportunity to re-accept managed democracy and not face total annihilation. For a time, the Cyborgs accepted managed democracy yet again, with Cyberstan remaining under Super Earth's control. This was until the Cyborgs again grew tired of the oppression that they once fought so hard against. This time the Cyborgs really did commit a terrorist attack against Super Earth and seceded again. And after their second victory against the Cyborg, Super Earth forced all the remaining Cyborgs into the mines of Cyberstan as slaves, ending the Cyborgs' fight for freedom for good. Eventually, they released a declaration of independence from Super Earth, stating that the Automatons, the enemies we fight in Helldivers 2, are their children, who will then carry on the fight in their stead, with their goal of ultimately liberating their home planet of Cyberstan and freeing the Cyborgs from their enslavement. So essentially, Super Earth went to war against the bots for having fundamentally different views than them, and with Super Earth's single goal of capturing and controlling the planets within the Milky Way and putting them under the rule of the Federation of Super Earth, they couldn't justify living alongside a group of, I guess, people or robots, whatever you want to call them, that have fundamentally different views than the Federation of Super Earth and could not coexist with them. Due to this fundamental difference, Super Earth, in a malicious attempt, bombed their own people just to find an excuse to stomp out the bots' own little government and culture that was going on in Cyberstan. Of course, after what Super Earth did to the bots, it's no wonder that they took up arms against the Federation of Super Earth and have a strong distaste for humans. This just gives the Automatons even more of a reason to hate Super Earth and humanity in general as they fight for their freedom from this oppression that Super Earth pushes on them, regardless of if they want it or not. Alright, now we're going to talk about the Illuminate. The Illuminate, who refer to themselves as the Squith, and are originally an aquatic species of some sort of squid, and are a technologically superior race with much more sophisticated technology than Super Earth or anything in the galaxy, and have mastered FTL travel far before Super Earth even had the technology to do so. The Illuminate have observed humanity for hundreds of years, and it is implied in the lore that the Illuminate are actually the flying saucers and UFOs we used to see in our infancy. It's also interesting to note that the Illuminate were actually something of the peacekeepers of the galaxy in their hundreds of thousands of years of, existence. The Illuminate eventually approached humanity with a peace offering. However, upon learning that the Illuminate possessed technologies leagues beyond anything humanity could create, the Federation declared war. Super Earth, of course, justified this war by claiming that the Illuminate had WMDs, or weapons of mass destruction, and they were too dangerous, and humanity had to obtain the technology for themselves, otherwise they would fall prey to these WMDs. Even though the Illuminate had no intention of using them, and were actually a very peaceful race. At the end of the First Intergalactic War, the Illuminate signed a treaty with Super Earth, barring the Illuminate from creating an Armed Forces branch, as well as turning over all their weapon technology to Super Earth. And yeah, so ever since that treaty in Helldivers 1 in the First Galactic War, the Illuminate have not been seen at all since then. And apparently, there are rumors that they've been exterminated by humanity. The veracity of this extermination is, of course, unknown, though there's rumors suggesting that they may potentially return in Helldivers 2 for the Second Galactic War, and will probably hold a strong grudge against Super Earth, the Helldivers, and humanity in general. Hopefully now, you can see that managed democracy and the Federation of Super Earth is actually an oppressor of not only its own people, but the alien races it's at war with as well. All the violence we see Super Earth committing in the First Galactic War, and currently in the Second Galactic War, are all situations and creations of their own making. And with this, we can see that the decisions that Super Earth made have created all these wars upon themselves by taking selfish actions against the aliens they've encountered, and actually are resulting in endless death and suffering throughout the Milky Way galaxy, for not only Helldivers, but the SEAF, which is the Super Earth Armed Forces, the Super Earth Colonists, and Super Earth itself, as all of us bring our brainwashed minds to deliver managed democracy as far as the galaxy will let us, despite how valid our enemies' reasons for fighting us are. And before we go, I just want to say, as a human, I'm a little bit biased towards Super Earth, because, you know, it's humanity, and despite Super Earth's iron grip and authoritarian regime, and how it selfishly pushes its own goals upon the races it fights, without Super Earth and managed democracy, who knows if humanity would have survived even this long. And that helps paint a perfect picture of how dystopian the Helldivers universe is, where each faction you're fighting, including Super Earth itself, all have their own justifications in doing what they do, and helps actually mimic what real life war is like. Super Earth is not the good guys. Helldivers are not the good guys. We are tools to progress our ideology and iron grip of authoritarianism throughout the galaxy, despite everyone else's qualms with it. But anyways, I hope you learned a bit about Super Earth, and you now see just how oppressive Super Earth is, and how ruthless it is to its own people and the aliens it encounters. Anyways, that's all I've got to say. I hope you enjoyed the video, and keep diving.